are coming to you live from Last Signal Radio. This is not a scheduled program. This is not a test. My name is James Carter, and I have been sitting in this chair for the better part of my career, covering conflicts most people hoped would never come. Tonight, I am not sure what to hope for. What I can tell you is what we know, and I will be precise, because precision is the only thing I have left to offer you right now. 3 days ago, the United States military launched what the Pentagon described as a targeted, proportional response to the killing of 2 American military advisors stationed near Baghdad. The strike package involved B-2 stealth bombers and naval Tomahawk missiles. 16 sites across western Iran were hit. 3 of them confirmed Revolutionary Guard command installations, 2 of them missile storage facilities, and the remaining 11 classified in the official briefing as infrastructure linked to proxy coordination. There were no American casualties in the strikes. Iranian state media reported 63 dead. Independent journalists in Tehran counted higher. The U.S. called it surgical. Iran called it a declaration of war. And that, if you are just joining us tonight, is where we begin.
James, I want to stay with those 63 people for a moment before we move into the architecture of what is happening militarily, because I think it is important, especially for our listeners who are sitting at home right now, maybe with their children asleep down the hall, maybe with the news on mute because they cannot bear the sound of it anymore. 63 people. We do not know most of their names yet. We know that one of the sites was near a residential neighborhood on the western edge of Shiraz, a city of nearly 2 million people, ancient, beautiful, a city that has poets buried in its soil, that has gardens that have survived centuries. And in one night, a neighborhood near its edge became a crater. One of the Iranian journalists who managed to get footage out before the blackout started, before the Iranian government shut down domestic internet access. He described walking through streets where people were pulling neighbors from rubble with their hands. No excavators, no organized rescue, just hands. That is the part that does not fit in a Pentagon briefing. That is the part that stays with me.
And it should stay with all of us. The facts do not diminish that. They contextualize it. Iran's response came 48 hours after the initial U.S. strikes. They launched what their military called Operation Righteous Storm. Our defense analysts here at Last Signal have gone through the confirmed data, and it is significant. Iran fired approximately 240 ballistic and cruise missiles. The trajectory data, compiled from Saudi, Israeli, and American radar systems, shows 3 simultaneous target clusters: Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the U.S. 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain, and the Ain al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq. Qatar and Bahrain missile defense systems, Patriot batteries, intercepted the majority. Roughly 60 to 70% of the missiles were destroyed before impact. But 60 to 70% is not 100%. At Al Udeid, 3 hangars were destroyed. 17 American service members were killed. In Bahrain, a naval support facility sustained direct hits. In Iraq, the runway at Ain al-Assad was rendered temporarily inoperable. Iran also launched a separate wave of shorter-range missiles targeting Israeli military positions in the Negev. Israel intercepted most of those. Most is not all.
17 American service members. I keep thinking about the families who are going to get a knock on the door or a phone call, or maybe they are already watching this right now and they already know. And I think about the families in Qatar because there are Qatari civilians who live near Al Udeid, who live in towns that are close to that base. We are getting fragmented reports that some of those missile fragments, the ones that were intercepted, fell into populated areas. That is what happens when you fight a missile war over cities. The debris has to go somewhere. We received a message from a listener in Doha. She said she heard the explosions from her apartment. She said her daughter, who is 7 years old, asked her if the sky was broken. She did not know what to tell her. I do not know what to tell her either. I think that is honest. I think that is where we are.
Let me walk our listeners through the geopolitical framework, because understanding the structure of this conflict is essential to understanding how quickly it has the potential to metastasize. The United States went into this with the backing of the United Kingdom, which has naval assets in the Persian Gulf. France issued a statement of solidarity, but has not committed forces. Germany, in an extraordinary parliamentary session that happened 2 days ago, voted to restrict its military from any direct participation, though it has not withdrawn from NATO coordination channels. Israel, predictably, is fully activated. The Israeli Air Force has been conducting its own strikes on Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon for the past week, accelerated in the days since the U.S.-Iran exchange began. Hezbollah has responded with rocket barrages into northern Israel. The city of Haifa has been hit. Not devastated, but hit. The Iron Dome is working, but the volume of fire is designed to overwhelm it over time.
Haifa. I want people to hear that name and feel it, because Haifa is not an abstraction. Haifa is a port city. It has Arab and Jewish neighborhoods. It has universities. It has a cable car that goes up Mount Carmel, and people used to take it on weekends with their kids. And right now, the sirens in Haifa go off and people run underground. We spoke briefly, I say briefly because the connection kept cutting, to a teacher in Haifa. She runs a primary school. She said she has been teaching her students how to count to 15, not because it is a math lesson, because 15 seconds is how long they have from siren to impact to get into the shelter. She said the children have gotten very good at it. They count calmly now. And she said that is the thing that breaks her. That they are calm. That they have already normalized this. A 7-year-old counting to 15 as a survival skill. That is where we are in week 2 of this conflict.
The Strait of Hormuz situation is what I want to address now, because this is the pressure point that transforms a military conflict into a civilizational one. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway. At its narrowest point, roughly 34 kilometers wide, through it passes approximately 21% of the world's oil supply on any given day. 21%. Iran has long held the capability to threaten or close the strait, and 3 days ago, they began exercising that capability in earnest. Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval units deployed fast attack boats and have begun what can only be described as an interdiction campaign. 2 oil tankers, one flagged under the Marshall Islands, one under the flag of Norway, were boarded and seized in international waters. The crews are being held. Additionally, a Singaporean-flagged container vessel reported being struck by a naval mine. It did not sink, but it had to be abandoned. The global shipping insurance market has already responded. War risk premiums for vessels transiting the Gulf have increased by over 400% in 72 hours. Lloyd's of London has suspended coverage for new entries into the Persian Gulf region entirely.
And what that means for people who are not economists, and I am barely one myself, is that the ships stop. Because if you cannot insure a vessel, you cannot finance it, you cannot crew it, you cannot move it. The ships stop. And when the ships stop, the fuel stops. And when the fuel stops, everything downstream of fuel stops, which is everything. I was on the phone this morning with a logistics coordinator based in Rotterdam, which is Europe's largest port. He told me that the ripple effect is already beginning. Not a crisis yet, a tightening. He used that word carefully, a tightening. He said they have about 3 weeks of buffer in the European fuel reserve system. 3 weeks before the tightening becomes a shortage. And he said this quietly, like he was afraid of saying it too loud. Because once people hear 3 weeks, they stop acting rationally. And then 3 weeks becomes 1 week, becomes days.
The proxy network activation is something our intelligence correspondent flagged to us before this broadcast, and it is critical context. Iran does not fight only with its own military. It has spent decades building what military analysts call the axis of resistance, a network of armed groups across the region that can be activated, supplied, and directed with varying degrees of Iranian command and control. In the past week, we have seen simultaneous escalation from Hezbollah in Lebanon, as mentioned, Houthi forces in Yemen, who have resumed drone and missile attacks on Saudi Arabian infrastructure. The Abha airport was struck 2 days ago. Iraqi Shia militias, who attacked the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad's Green Zone with rockets. The compound sustained damage. No American fatalities reported, but the ambassador has been evacuated. And Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which has launched rockets from Gaza into southern Israel on 3 separate occasions in the past week. This is coordinated. This is not spontaneous. The simultaneity is itself a message.
The simultaneity is a message. You said that precisely, James. And the message is, we are everywhere you are. And that message lands differently depending on who you are. If you are a military strategist, you read it as a tactical situation. If you are a mother in Riyadh whose daughter's school is 3 kilometers from an oil facility that the Houthis just put on their target list, you read it as something else entirely. We have been getting messages from listeners across the region, and I want to share a few of them because I think they ground this. A man in Beirut wrote to say that he filled his bathtub with water because the electricity cuts have already started. He said Beirut has been through this before, 2006, 2020, and his body remembers what to do before his mind catches up. He said he filled the bathtub and then sat on the edge of it and just cried for a while. Then he made coffee. Then he wrote to us. A woman in Baghdad said she sent her children to her sister in Erbil in the north because she does not trust the Green Zone perimeter anymore. She said the sound of the rockets last night was different from before. Not louder, just different. Like a different intention behind them.
The oil price situation is accelerating beyond initial projections. When this conflict began, futures traders pushed Brent crude to $112 per barrel, significant but manageable within the existing shock absorption frameworks most G7 economies have. As of this morning's last available trading data before markets suspended in Tokyo and Singapore, the price had reached $168 per barrel. For reference, the previous all-time high was around $147 in the summer of 2008. What we are watching in real time is the energy price floor of the global economy being shattered. The strategic petroleum reserves of the United States, the European Union, and Japan have been partially activated. Coordinated releases announced by the IEA. But reserve releases are a delay mechanism, not a solution. They buy weeks. They do not solve the underlying problem, which is that one of the world's most critical shipping corridors is now a combat zone.
I want to talk about what this looks like at the ground level, because we talk about oil prices as numbers, but oil prices are not numbers. Oil prices are the cost of heating a home in Warsaw this winter. Oil prices are the cost of running a fishing boat out of a port in Kerala, India, where an entire coastal economy depends on diesel. Oil prices are whether a hospital in Lagos, Nigeria can afford to run its generators. And that hospital runs its generators constantly because the grid is unreliable, and if the generators stop, so do the ventilators. These are the connections that don't show up in the commodity market tickers. I spoke to a doctor in Lagos this afternoon. We had about 4 minutes before the call dropped. She said they are already rationing generator fuel. She said it calmly. She said rationing in a way that told me rationing was not new, but the reason for it was. She said, "We have never rationed because of a war in the Persian Gulf before, and now we are." And she wanted to know how long.
The answer to that question depends heavily on what happens in the next several days. And I want to be responsible here. I am not going to speculate beyond what our verified information supports. What I can tell you is that NATO called an emergency session. Not the standard consultation mechanism. An Article 4 session, meaning a member nation has determined its security is being threatened. Turkey called it. Turkey, which has the second largest standing army in NATO, which shares a border with Iran, which has been fielding incoming calls from both Washington and Tehran for the past week. Turkey's position is extraordinarily delicate. It is a NATO member. It also has significant economic relationships with Iran. It is not a country that wants to choose sides in this conflict, and right now it is being forced to. The Turkish president made a statement yesterday that was diplomatically carefully worded, but contained a phrase that our analysts flagged immediately. He said Turkey would defend its sovereign interests by any means available. That phrase, in the vocabulary of Turkish statecraft, carries specific weight. It is not a declaration of war. It is a warning that one is possible.
There is something I need to say about the refugee movement that is already beginning because I think it is being underreported in the coverage. People are moving, not in the numbers that suggest a full collapse, not yet. But the early movers are always the ones with resources, and the early movers are already moving. We are seeing increased border crossings from Iraq into Jordan. Flights out of Beirut were, as of 2 days ago, completely sold out for 3 weeks in advance. A travel agent in Beirut told me she has been working 20-hour days and she cannot find a seat. She said people are calling who have not left during any previous crisis. People who survived the Civil War in the 1980s, who survived 2006, who survived the port explosion in 2020. And they are calling now. They are saying this one feels different. That is significant. People who have calibrated their survival instincts across decades of crisis are saying this one feels different. We should listen to that.
The intelligence picture has now changed dramatically in the past 24 hours, and I want to be careful about how I characterize this, because some of what we are reporting comes from sources we cannot fully verify on this broadcast. But the broad outlines are being confirmed by multiple independent channels. There are credible reports. I want to emphasize credible, not confirmed, that China has begun supplying Iran with advanced satellite intelligence, specifically targeting data from China's Yaogan series of reconnaissance satellites. If accurate, this represents a qualitative shift in Iran's military capability. Iran's missile program is formidable, but it has historically suffered from targeting precision. If China is providing real-time satellite imagery to improve Iranian targeting, the threat calculation for U.S. naval assets in the Gulf changes significantly. Our sources indicate that 2 U.S. carrier strike groups, the Gerald R. Ford Group and the Abraham Lincoln Group, are now positioned outside the Persian Gulf in the Arabian Sea, precisely because of this intelligence threat assessment.
China. That word just shifted something in this broadcast. I felt it as James said it, and I think our listeners felt it. Because up until this point, as catastrophic as this has been, it has been in the clinical language of foreign policy, a regional conflict. And the word China makes it something else. It makes it something that the historians of our grandchildren's era will have a name for. I want to share what our East Asia correspondent sent us before we went on air, because he is someone who has covered Beijing for 12 years, and he wrote this to me, not as a report, as a message. He said what China is doing right now is not accidental. It is not emotional. It is a calculation. He said they are watching how America responds to this, and they are making decisions about Taiwan. And then he said, what happens in the Strait of Hormuz this week will determine what happens in the Taiwan Strait in the coming years. I think that might be the most important thing said in this broadcast so far, and I am going to let it sit there.
Russia's position has also crystallized. The Kremlin issued a statement this morning that condemned U.S. strikes on Iran as unprovoked aggression against a sovereign nation, predictable, rhetorical. But the operational moves are what matter. Russia has repositioned 2 of its guided missile frigates from the Caspian Sea flotilla to positions that put them within range of the eastern Persian Gulf. Additionally, and this is significant, Russian GRU, military intelligence, has reportedly increased its presence in Iranian military command facilities. This goes beyond advising. This is embedded operational coordination. The nature of what Russia is providing is not confirmed, but the pattern is familiar. We saw similar integration in Syria beginning in 2015, and the effect on the conflict trajectory there was substantial. If Russia is now providing Iran with air defense coordination, electronic warfare support, and targeting integration, then the conflict has a different ceiling than the one we entered with.
There is something profoundly disorienting about the fact that we are talking about Russian frigates and Chinese satellites and Iranian missiles, and we have not yet talked about the human beings in Tehran. Because Tehran is a city of 9 million people. 9 million. It is one of the largest cities in the Middle East. It has traffic jams and universities and bad coffee shops and good ones and families who eat dinner together and argue about politics and watch football. And it has now been 3 weeks under partial blackout. The Iranian government has cut mobile internet access, limited international communications. State media is the dominant information source for most Iranians. What we know from the few journalists still operating inside is that food prices have doubled, that fuel queues in Tehran are hours long, that there are neighborhoods where the power goes out every night at 9 and does not come back until morning, that the hospitals, they were already strained before this, are now under enormous pressure from the casualties of the U.S. strikes and the stress injuries and the people who cannot get medication because the supply chains are disrupted. 9 million people living that. Not a number. A city.
A cyber attack of significant scale has now been confirmed. We are getting verified reports from our technology desk. In the past 48 hours, critical infrastructure networks in 3 countries have experienced what cybersecurity analysts are calling a coordinated state-level intrusion. The targets: the electrical grid management system of the United Arab Emirates. Dubai experienced a rolling blackout covering approximately 40% of the city for 16 hours. Secondly, the financial messaging network. Not SWIFT itself, but an interbank communication layer used across Gulf Cooperation Council nations, experienced a disruption that has frozen cross-border transactions in the region. And third, and most alarming, water treatment facility control systems in 2 Saudi cities, Jeddah and Dammam, showed signs of unauthorized access. The Saudi government moved those systems to manual control within hours, and no contamination occurred. But the intrusion happened. Someone was in those systems. The attribution is being debated, but the technical signature, the tools used, the entry vectors, matches patterns previously associated with Iranian cyber units operating under IRGC direction.
Dubai without power for 16 hours. I want people to think about that. Dubai is a city of extraordinary infrastructure, extraordinary wealth, extraordinary redundancy in its systems. It is not a city you expect to go dark, and it went dark. The images that came out, and there were images, because even in a blackout people have phone batteries, showed the skyline without lights. The Burj Khalifa, dark. The marina, dark. And the thing that struck me was not the skyline, it was the airport. Dubai International Airport is one of the busiest in the world, and it went into emergency generator mode, and they held over 300 flights on the ground, and there were an estimated 40,000 passengers stranded in that terminal. 40,000 people sitting on the floor of Terminal 3, no air conditioning working properly, in a Gulf summer, children, elderly people, people who were already trying to evacuate other parts of the region, just stopped, sitting on the floor. That is what a cyber attack on a power grid looks like on the human end.
NATO's emergency session in Brussels produced a communiqué that is being analyzed intensely by defense ministries around the world. The language is precise, and for those who understand NATO's escalation vocabulary, alarming. The communiqué invoked Article 5 language, not formally triggered Article 5, but invoked its language in describing the cyber attacks on UAE infrastructure, noting that the UAE hosts thousands of NATO military personnel and that attacks on infrastructure endangering NATO personnel would be viewed as attacks on the alliance. This is a significant escalation of rhetoric. It begins to build the legal and political scaffolding for a formal NATO response. The UK has moved 2 destroyers into the Red Sea. France, which said it would not commit forces, has now moved its carrier group, the Charles de Gaulle, to a position in the eastern Mediterranean that puts it within strike range of Iranian territory. France is not striking Iran, but it is positioned too. That positioning is itself a message, a deterrent signal, and a potential tripwire.
There's something I keep coming back to, and I want to say it plainly. The people who are making the decisions that are moving those ships and writing those communiques, they are in rooms. Clean, lit rooms, with coffee and staffers and secure communications. And the people living the consequences of those decisions are in rubble, in queues, in airports with no air conditioning, in hospitals with generator fuel running out. And there is always this gap between the decision room and the consequence room in every war, in every crisis. But I feel that gap more acutely right now than I ever have, because the consequence room in this conflict is getting very large very fast. It is spreading from Iran and Qatar and Iraq and Lebanon and Yemen and Saudi Arabia, and it is starting to include Dubai airports and Lagos hospital generators and Rotterdam fuel buffers. The consequence room is becoming the size of the world.
Let me update our listeners on the military situation in the Strait of Hormuz, because it has deteriorated sharply in the past 24 hours. Iranian naval forces have now deployed what are called swarm tactics, large numbers of fast attack craft coordinating against singular targets. The USS Nitsa, a guided missile destroyer, engaged a swarm of approximately 30 Iranian fast boats in the lower Gulf. The engagement lasted several hours. The Nitsa was not sunk, let me be clear, but it sustained damage. At least one American sailor was killed, several injured. The Nitsa was able to withdraw from the engagement area. However, during that engagement, 3 commercial vessels that were attempting to transit, the strait were left without U.S. naval escort. One of them, a Japanese oil tanker called the Izumi Maru, was boarded and seized by Iranian forces. Its crew of 21 is now in Iranian custody. The Japanese government has called an emergency cabinet session. Japan imports approximately 10% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. This is no longer an abstraction for Tokyo.
21 crew members, sailors. People who signed up to work cargo ships, not to be pawns in a geopolitical confrontation. One of them. And this came through a maritime union based in Manila because a significant portion of the world's commercial maritime crew is Filipino. One of them managed to send a message through a satellite phone before communications were cut. He sent it to his wife in Cebu. He said, "Shein, I am alive. Pray." That is the message. I am alive. Pray. His wife shared it with the union rep. The union rep shared it with us. 21 people on a ship with that message as the last word from one of them. His name is not being released at the family's request. But he has a name. He has a wife. He is probably standing on the deck of a seized tanker in the Strait of Hormuz right now, and I do not know if the decisions being made in those clean rooms have him in them.
The economic cascade is now visible in data that is stark. Global stock markets, where they are still operating because several Asian exchanges have suspended trading, have collectively lost approximately $14 trillion in market value since the beginning of this conflict. That is not a meaningful number in isolation. Let me make it meaningful. The global food commodity markets are pricing in supply disruption at a scale that food security analysts are calling potentially catastrophic for import-dependent nations. Countries like Egypt, which imports approximately 60% of its wheat, are now facing import costs that have doubled while their foreign currency reserves are under severe pressure. The Egyptian pound has lost 23% of its value in the past week. Egypt's population is over 100 million people. When Egypt's food import economics break down, the political consequences are historically explosive. This is not speculation. Egypt's 2011 revolution had food price inflation as a structural driver.
James mentioned Egypt, and I want to stay there for a moment because what is happening in Cairo right now is the thing that international news cameras are not fully capturing because they are all pointed at the Gulf. Cairo is a city of 20 million people, and it has, again, bread lines. I want to say that word carefully. Bread lines. Not metaphorical ones. Lines outside government bakeries, subsidized bread outlets that are 4 and 5 hours long. Not because the bread is gone, it is not gone yet. But people are afraid it will be gone, and when people are afraid that something will be gone, they move as if it already is. And those bread lines have started to turn. There was a confrontation 2 days ago outside a subsidized bakery in the Shubra district of Cairo. A fight broke out in the line. The police came. The police used batons. A 38-year-old man named Khalid Masri, his name was given to us by a local journalist, was hospitalized. He came to buy bread for his 4 children. He is in a hospital now. And the Shubra neighborhood is tense in a way that the government there does not want internationally visible.
The conflict has now spread geographically in a way that removes any remaining characterization of it as regional. I need to be very careful and methodical here, because this is where the information becomes contested and fragmented, and accuracy matters more than speed. What we know, Pakistan, which shares a long border with Iran and has a complex relationship with both Iran and the United States, has closed its border crossings with Iran and recalled its ambassador from Tehran for consultations. The Pakistani military has moved units to its western border. Pakistan's stated reason is precautionary defensive positioning. In the South China Sea, China has conducted what it called routine military exercises. But the scale and positioning of those exercises, 3 carrier groups and accompanying surface assets, is not what routine exercises look like. The exercises are in the vicinity of the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan's government has gone to its highest alert level. The U.S. Pacific Command has moved assets. We have not seen direct military confrontation in the Pacific, but the pieces are being positioned on a board, and the people moving them know exactly what they are doing.
I want to read something to our listeners. Before we came on air, I received an email, a long email, from a retired U.S. Army colonel who served in the Gulf War, in Iraq, and Afghanistan. He asked that I not use his name, and I'm honoring that. He wrote, "I have spent my career in rooms where these decisions are made. I know the logic of escalation. I know the language of strategic signaling and deterrence and managed confrontation. What I cannot tell you, what no one in those rooms can tell you, is where the threshold is. Every escalation ladder has a point where the logic stops working and the emotion starts. Where someone makes a decision not because of doctrine, but because of fear or pride or exhaustion. I have seen it happen in smaller conflicts. I am watching the pieces now, and I do not see anyone who knows where the threshold is. I am not sure the threshold has a location anymore." I thought you should all hear that, from someone who has been in those rooms.
The cyber attack situation has escalated beyond the Gulf region. This is confirmed by our technology correspondents and corroborated by government statements. In the past 48 hours, the German federal government's internal communications network was breached. The breach was contained, but it exposed classified coordination documents related to NATO's emergency session. The French National Railway System's signaling network experienced a disruption that brought train services to a halt across the Paris-Lyon-Marseille corridor for approximately 16 hours. French authorities have not officially attributed it, but have called it a hostile cyber intrusion. Most significantly, elements of the U.S. East Coast power grid, specifically the PJM interconnection, which manages electricity for 13 states and the District of Columbia, experienced attempted intrusions that were detected and blocked. But the detection logs show the intrusion attempts were sophisticated, persistent, and targeted at substation control systems. These are not random hackers. This is a coordinated campaign to demonstrate capability and generate fear in Western civilian populations.
The Paris train stoppage, 16 hours. I want to describe what that looked like because it is not just a logistical event. The Paris-Lyon corridor is one of the busiest rail lines in Europe. It moves roughly 300,000 passengers on a normal day. When those trains stopped, the platforms at Gare de Lyon were, and this is the word witnesses used, packed. Not full. Packed. Like concert venue packed. Without the concert, without the energy, without the reason. Just people, standing, with luggage, looking at screens that showed no information. The platform announcements went silent. People started calling each other. The cell networks degraded under the load. And then, and this part was reported by multiple witnesses independently, the lights in the station flickered. Just once. And the witnesses said the sound in that station changed. The collective sound of 20,000 people when the lights flicker and they do not know why is a very particular sound. One woman described it as, and I am translating from the French, a sound like the beginning of a scream that stops itself. People are not panicking yet, but they are standing very close to it.
We are now receiving reports that I want to treat with significant care, because they are coming through channels that are less verified than I would prefer. But the consistency across multiple sources compels us to report them. There are reports, multiple, concurrent, from different sources, of what appear to be large explosions in the southern Iranian port city of Bandar Abbas. Bandar Abbas is strategically critical. It is the home of Iran's main naval fleet. It controls the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz, and it has been a command hub for Iranian naval operations in this conflict. The reports describe multiple large explosions, secondary explosions suggesting ammunition or fuel detonation, and what witnesses in the strait describe as the sky being orange in the direction of Bandar Abbas for an extended period. We do not know the cause. We do not know if this is a U.S. strike, an Israeli strike, a technical accident, which does happen during wartime under stress conditions, or something else. We are working to confirm. What I can tell you is that if Bandar Abbas has been struck at significant scale, the implications for both the conflict trajectory and the Iranian command and control structure are enormous.
The sky being orange. I keep thinking about that phrase. Someone in the strait on a vessel or on a coastline looked up and the sky was orange in the direction of a city of 500,000 people. And they described it to someone who put it in a message to us. And that is how we know. That is the chain of knowledge right now, not satellites, not verified military reports, not press releases. Someone looked at the sky and it was orange, and they told someone. I have been thinking during the commercial break we just took about what it is we are actually doing in this chair right now, what it means to broadcast in a moment like this. And I think the answer is, we are being the voice for the person looking at the orange sky. We are carrying what they saw into the spaces where people are not at the strait, who are in their homes in Glasgow and Toronto and Karachi and Sao Paulo, who need to know what the person at the strait knows. That feels like a responsibility that is almost too large to hold, but I am going to hold it.
Bandar Abbas has been confirmed struck. The Pentagon has issued a statement, not a press briefing, a written statement released through official channels, acknowledging precision strikes on Iranian naval command and weapons infrastructure in the Bandar Abbas region. The statement claims the strikes were in direct response to active Iranian naval attacks on Allied vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. No information provided on the weapons used. No casualty estimates from the U.S. side. Iran's state media is claiming the strikes killed 41 people, including civilians in surrounding neighborhoods. Independent verification is not currently possible given communication restrictions. However, the strike on Bandar Abbas is categorically different from the strikes that opened this conflict. The opening strikes targeted military command and missile infrastructure, significant but geographically bounded to interior locations. Bandar Abbas is a major port city. It is Iran's most strategically vital naval installation. Striking it at this scale is a statement. Iran will read it as a statement. Russia will read it as a statement. China will read it as a statement. Every government with a nuclear deterrent posture will run the calculation of what this means for where this ends.
41 people. 41 confirmed dead in Bandar Abbas, if Iranian state media is accurate. And I want to note, because it matters, that Iranian state media, even accounting for its political management of information, has generally reported casualty numbers from U.S. strikes that have been corroborated by independent observers when those observers have been able to access the sites. 41 is probably not inflated. 41 people in a port city who woke up this morning and are not alive now. And I know James is going to bring more facts, and I'm grateful for that because the facts are necessary. But I keep thinking about the fact that somewhere in Bandar Abbas tonight, there is someone trying to find out where a family member is. There is someone digging. There is someone calling a name into rubble. And I am sitting here in a studio that has air conditioning and a working phone and a coffee machine, and I am talking about it. And that gap is, I feel it physically. The gap between describing a thing and living it.
North Korea has now released a statement. I want our listeners to understand the significance of North Korea entering this conversation. The statement, released through KCNA, the North Korean state news agency, declared that North Korea fully supports the sovereign resistance of the Islamic Republic of Iran and condemned U.S. strikes as criminal acts of imperial aggression. The statement also included language that our Korea analysts flagged immediately. It stated that North Korea would take all necessary measures to defend the forces of resistance against American hegemony. That language, all necessary measures, is the formulation North Korea uses when it is signaling willingness to act. It is deliberate. It is not accidental phrasing. North Korea has, in the current crisis, potential relevance in several ways. It could provide Iran with ballistic missile components or technology. It has conventional military assets positioned near the South Korean border that are always a potential flashpoint, and it has conducted provocative missile tests in previous periods of U.S. military focus elsewhere. South Korea has gone to elevated alert. Japan, which already had its missile defense systems activated, has convened an emergency cabinet session.
I'm going to be honest with our listeners right now. We are in a moment in this broadcast where the information is coming faster than I can emotionally process it. And I think that is true for everyone. North Korea. We just added North Korea to the constellation of things happening simultaneously. I want to give our listeners a moment, and I know this is radio and the silence is uncomfortable, but I want to give our listeners a moment to just breathe, because I think that is the most human thing I can offer right now. The world is very loud tonight. Everything is escalating at the same time, and I think it is okay to feel that the weight of this is almost too much. It does not mean you are weak. It does not mean you are not paying attention. It means you are a human being receiving news about the potential end of the world as we have known it, and that is a lot. So breathe. And then we will continue.
North Korea has launched ballistic missiles. The launches were detected by U.S. and Japanese early warning systems. Our defense correspondent has confirmed 5 missiles were launched from a site in North Hwanghae Province. The trajectory data shows 3 of them flew over the Sea of Japan and landed in the water approximately 400 kilometers from the Japanese coast. The other 2 are classified in the initial data as having shorter ranges. They may have been test firings at internal ranges. No missiles have struck any target. This is a demonstration. North Korea is demonstrating that its missiles work, that its military is active, that the crisis in the Middle East has not left it inattentive. Japan activated its missile defense systems. That activation itself is significant, because Japan's missile defense activations are visible to satellites and radar systems operated by every major power, and each one carries a potential for misidentification. South Korea has gone to its highest peacetime alert status. U.S. forces on the Korean peninsula are at elevated readiness. We have 2 military crises now operating simultaneously in different hemispheres. That is the state of the world at this moment.
There is a teacher in Seoul whose name I know. She wrote to us a week ago, before any of this, asking for advice on how to talk to her students about the tensions in the Middle East. She wrote in very careful English. She said, "My students are teenagers. They are scared. I do not want to lie to them, but I do not want to terrify them. How do I tell the truth in a way that gives them something to hold on to?" I wrote back to her. I tried to give her something useful. I told her to help them focus on what they can do, their community, their connections, their agency in small things. I thought about that message tonight when the Korean Peninsula alert came through, because that teacher's students just got a very different kind of lesson. They are living the thing we were talking about abstractly a week ago. I hope she is all right. I hope they are in a shelter and she is still finding things for them to hold on to.
A development of enormous gravity has just come through, and I am going to report it exactly as we have it, without editorializing, because the facts are sufficient. Multiple governments have simultaneously activated their national emergency broadcast systems. The United States has sent an alert, a wireless emergency alert, to all mobile phones in the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. The message reads, "This is an official U.S. government emergency alert. The nation is facing a severe national security threat. Follow emergency instructions from your local authorities. Stay tuned to official broadcast channels." An identical alert has gone out in the United Kingdom. Germany has activated its Nina warning system, the national warning app, with similar language. France has activated FR Alert. Japan's J Alert system was already active for the missile launches and has now expanded its message. South Korea, Australia, Canada. These are not coordinated in their content. Each government is issuing its own language, but they are simultaneous. Simultaneous national emergency activations across NATO members and allies in the Pacific. Something has caused this. We do not yet know what that something is. We are trying to find out.
Every phone in the United States just received an emergency alert. Right now, as I speak, millions of people are looking at their phones. People who went to bed tonight thinking they were inside a crisis, but outside the worst of it. People in Oklahoma, in Minnesota, in Maine, in Arizona. People who were already anxious, but who had the geography of distance as a buffer. Those people just felt that buffer removed. I know what that moment feels like. I felt it when my phone buzzed a few minutes ago. I looked down and I read those words and my stomach did something specific. It is not panic yet. It is the physiological predecessor to panic. It is the body understanding something before the mind has finished reading. Millions of people are having that feeling right now, and I do not know what is causing the alerts. James is going to find out. Until he does, I want to say to every single person who just looked at their phone, you are not alone in what you just felt.
We now have reporting that has been confirmed by 3 independent sources, including a serving U.S. government official who has spoken to our Washington correspondent. The emergency alerts were triggered by the detection, and I am going to read this carefully. The detection by multiple Allied radar and satellite systems of what appears to be a large-scale ballistic missile launch. The launches appear to originate from territory consistent with western Iran. The number of launches is significant. Early reports indicate between 40 and 60 missiles in the initial salvo. The trajectory analysis is ongoing. Early assessments suggest the trajectory is consistent with targets in Israel, Saudi Arabia, and potentially further. There are, and I must stress these are unconfirmed elements within this report, there are preliminary radar signatures that have caused enough concern within the U.S. Missile Defense Command to trigger the emergency alert protocol. I am not going to speculate on what those signatures indicate. What I will tell you is that the U.S. missile defense system is active. Israeli Arrow systems are active. Saudi Patriot batteries are active. And the world is watching radar screens right now.
I need to tell our listeners something. We received a text message from a listener in Tel Aviv. It came in 30 seconds ago. It says the sirens are going off. He says he can hear multiple sirens. He says he is in his building's shelter. He says it is very loud outside. And then he sent a second message. It says there are flashes. James. There are flashes over Tel Aviv.
Israeli missile defense. The Arrow 3 system, the most capable layer of Israel's multi-tiered defense architecture, is designed for exo-atmospheric interception. It intercepts ballistic missiles during their descent phase outside the atmosphere. The flashes our listener is describing are consistent with interception events. I want to be accurate. The flashes could be interceptions. They could be impacts. We cannot know from one text message from a listener in a shelter. What we know is that the largest ballistic missile salvo Iran has ever launched is in the air right now. It has Israeli territory as at least one of its target sets, and Israel's missile defense system is engaging it. This is unprecedented in scale. I am monitoring incoming reports. I need our listeners to understand. We will tell you everything we know as we know it. We will not speculate. We will not fill silence with fear. The silence, right now, is because we are learning.
Our listener in Tel Aviv just sent another message. He says, some got through. He says he can hear explosions. He says the shelter is holding. He says he can hear his neighbor crying, and he says he's going to stop texting now because his phone battery is dying and he wants to save it. He says, God willing, I will write again. I need to pause for a moment. I am sorry. I need a moment. James, can you continue?
I will continue. Israeli emergency services are reporting a mass casualty event in the greater Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Tel Aviv's population within the urban area is approximately 4 million people. The interception rate of Israeli missile defense systems has been extraordinary. Preliminary counts suggest the overwhelming majority of the Iranian salvo was intercepted. But an overwhelming majority is not total. The missiles that penetrated the defense layer, early estimates suggest between 6 and 12, struck populated areas. The neighborhoods of Bat Yam, Rishon LeZion, and what appears to be one impact in central Tel Aviv, near the Dizengoff area, are being reported as strike locations. The Sheba Medical Center, one of Israel's largest hospitals, issued an emergency mass casualty alert. Emergency services across the entire country have been mobilized. The Israeli Air Force is already responding. Israel's Prime Minister has made a statement. One sentence. He said, Israel will destroy those who brought this on themselves. We do not know yet the full casualty count. We know it is significant.
Tel Aviv. I have been to Tel Aviv. I have walked on Dizengoff Street. It is a street of cafes and art galleries and people arguing about politics and eating hummus and living their lives with the kind of exhausted joy that characterizes Israeli life in a country that has never not been at war. It is a street full of people, and it has been struck. I do not know how many people. I do not know which cafe. I do not know if the gallery I went to is still there. I do not know if the man who sold me coffee is all right. Those are the thoughts that come, and you cannot stop them. The thought that somewhere specific in a city you walked through, something has just happened that is irreversible. That is what war does. It makes irreversible moments in places that used to be ordinary.
The Israeli retaliatory response has begun. The Israeli Air Force launched within approximately 2 hours of the impacts in Tel Aviv and other cities. The strike packages are targeting Iranian territory, not the same profile as the initial U.S. strikes. The Israeli strikes are hitting central Iran. Tehran's air defense systems are active. The Imam Khomeini International Airport, which serves Tehran, has been struck. The runway is reported non-functional. Israeli munitions have hit targets in Isfahan. Isfahan, where Iran has nuclear-related facilities, though the strikes on Isfahan are being described by our sources as targeting conventional military infrastructure there, not nuclear sites. At least, not yet. The Iranian government has gone silent on all official channels for approximately 40 minutes. No statement, no television broadcast. Silence from a government that has been broadcasting continuously since this conflict began is itself information. Something is happening inside that government right now.
40 minutes of government silence from Tehran. I was a journalist in Cairo during the 18 days of the 2011 revolution, and I remember what government silence sounds like. It is not the same as nothing. It is a very specific thing. It is the sound of a system under internal stress so severe that the normal functions, the press releases, the statements, the managed communication, have broken down. It means the people who would normally be issuing the statement are doing something else. Something that has commanded all of their attention. What that is in Tehran right now, I do not know. But I know what government silence means. It means the situation has exceeded the prepared responses.
Russia has now issued an official statement that our Moscow correspondent has transmitted to us. The statement, from the Russian Foreign Ministry, declares that Russia views the Israeli strikes on Iran as an act of aggression requiring immediate international response, and states that Russia is activating all available diplomatic and strategic means to protect its allies and interests. Russia further states that it is placing its nuclear forces on elevated readiness. The phrase is elevated readiness. This is a formal status change in Russia's nuclear posture. The last time Russia publicly announced a nuclear posture change was during the early months of the Ukraine conflict. The practical meaning of elevated readiness is that the command and control systems for nuclear weapons are more actively staffed, more actively monitored, and the decision timelines for nuclear use are accelerated. It does not mean nuclear weapons are being used or are imminent. It means the margin we spoke about earlier, has gotten thinner.
The margin has gotten thinner. James, I need to say something. I have been doing this job for 17 years. I have covered conflicts. I have sat in this chair through hard nights. And I need to be honest with our listeners as human beings listening to another human being. I am frightened. Not performing frightened. Not broadcasting frightened. Genuinely, in my chest, frightened. Because what we are describing tonight is not the architecture of a crisis that resolves. We are describing an architecture that adds elements. Every 15 minutes, a new element. North Korea, Russia's nuclear posture, Tel Aviv, Isfahan, and each element does not replace the previous ones. They accumulate. They are all simultaneously true. And I do not know, I genuinely do not know, what the shape of tomorrow looks like from here. And I think you deserve to hear that from me, because I think you are feeling it too.
I am going to tell you what I know about the shape of the next hours and days, factually, and without false reassurance. The immediate military picture. Israeli strikes on Iran are ongoing. Iranian missile forces may be degraded by the scale of the salvo they just launched, but they are not eliminated. Iran has submarine assets, 3 Kilo-class submarines of Russian origin, whose current location is unknown. U.S. and allied forces are at maximum alert. The carrier groups in the Arabian Sea are conducting flight operations. The Russian elevated nuclear readiness has triggered a corresponding U.S. review of its own nuclear posture. This is standard protocol and does not itself indicate escalation, but it means both nuclear superpowers are currently in heightened nuclear awareness posture simultaneously. The Pacific situation, Chinese military exercises have not produced any hostile action, but they are ongoing, and the positioning is maintained. The Korean Peninsula, North Korea has gone quiet after its missile demonstrations. South Korea and Japan remain at elevated readiness.
A message just came in from a listener who asked not to be identified. She is a nurse in a hospital in Amman, Jordan. She says her hospital has received the first of what she expects to be many casualties evacuated from areas where the fighting is worst. From Iraq, from Syria, from Lebanon. She says the hospital is at capacity. She says the staff is exhausted, but they are holding. And she says something that I want to share because it is the most important thing anyone has said to us tonight. She says, out here, the people taking care of each other are not thinking about geopolitics. They are thinking about the person in front of them. She says the war is very large. But in this hallway right now, the world is one person and one doctor and one pair of hands. I think that is the thing. I think that is the only thing that can hold against the size of what is happening tonight. One person, one doctor, one pair of hands.
We are receiving fragmented reports, and I must stress fragmented, unverified, of a possible detonation of an unconventional nature in the vicinity of an Iranian military installation in the Zagros Mountains region. This report has come from a single source, a signals intelligence analyst who has spoken to our defense correspondent under condition of absolute anonymity. The source describes a seismic signature detected by monitoring stations that is inconsistent with conventional high explosive weapons. The signature is described as potentially consistent with a sub-kiloton nuclear device or a very large conventional detonation. Our source was explicit. They cannot confirm which. The CTBTO, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, whose global monitoring network detects precisely this kind of seismic event, has not issued any statement. The U.S. government has not issued any statement. Multiple governments are presumably analyzing the same data. We are reporting this because we have received it from a credible source who has been right before. We are not confirming a nuclear detonation. We are telling you that something happened in the Zagros Mountains region of Iran that requires analysis to classify. We will update you the moment we have further information.
I need everyone listening to hear what James just said with exactness. He said, we cannot confirm which. He said, we are not confirming a nuclear detonation. I am saying it again because I know what people hear when certain words come near each other. And I know that right now every person listening to this broadcast just had a very specific physical reaction. I had it too. And I want to sit in that reaction for a moment without running from it and without amplifying it beyond what the facts support. Something happened. Something that requires analysis. The people whose job it is to classify that something are doing their jobs right now, until they tell us, or until we hear from sources we trust. What that something is, we do not know. And not knowing in a moment like this is not failure. It is honesty. And honesty, right now, is the most important thing we have.
While we wait for further information on the Zagros incident, I want to give our listeners a factual accounting of where the world is tonight, because sometimes the accumulation of events obscures the overall picture. The Strait of Hormuz is a combat zone. The Red Sea is effectively closed to commercial shipping. Global oil markets are in a state of historic disruption. The European Union's eastern member states are reporting fuel shortages beginning in Hungary and Romania. The New York Stock Exchange has suspended trading for the second day running. Trading halts of this duration have not occurred since September 2001. The Internet is functioning but degraded. Certain transoceanic routes are running at reduced capacity. Multiple national governments have activated emergency powers. The United Kingdom has invoked the Civil Contingencies Act. France has declared a state of national emergency. Israel is under martial law conditions in its northern cities. Pakistan has closed its borders. Egypt is experiencing civil unrest. The World Food Program has declared a Level 3 emergency, its highest, for Yemen, Lebanon, and Gaza. The International Red Cross has lost contact with its field teams in 3 of its operational zones in the region. These are the facts. Taken together, they constitute the worst global crisis since the Second World War.
Since the Second World War. That phrase. I want our listeners to hear it. Not as hyperbole. James does not use hyperbole. As a factual comparison by someone who has spent a career measuring events against each other. Since the Second World War. And I want to talk about what that means for ordinary people, not governments. People. When the Second World War ended, my grandmother was a young woman in a country that had been occupied. She told me once what it felt like the day it ended. She said the strangest thing was that the sky looked exactly the same blue sky, and she could not understand how it could look the same. She had expected the sky to look different on the other side of it. Tonight, I am thinking about the sky, about what it will look like on the other side of whatever this is. And I am thinking about the people all over the world, in their shelters, in their mountains, in their hospitals, in their kitchens with their bathtubs full of water and their phones at low battery, who are also waiting to find out what the sky looks like on the other side.
The CTBTO has now released a statement. I want to read it exactly. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization has detected a seismic event in western Iran, registering approximately 3.8 on the Richter scale. The CTBTO states that the seismic signature is under analysis and that preliminary data does not rule out a nuclear detonation, but also does not confirm one. The organization has activated its full monitoring network and is requesting that member states provide all relevant data to assist classification. Several things to note. The CTBTO has never in its operational history used the phrase "does not rule out" in a public statement about a seismic event in a conflict zone. That language is itself unprecedented. Second, 3.8 on the Richter scale is consistent with a small nuclear device, but it is also consistent with a very large conventional explosion near a munitions depot. The secondary detonations of stored munitions can produce seismic signatures in this range. We do not know. The people whose job it is to know are working on it. I will tell you the moment we know.
Last Signal Radio has been on air for 11 years. We have covered elections and disasters and pandemics and conflicts. We have sat in this chair through hard things. Tonight is different. I can feel it, and James can feel it, and I think our listeners can feel it. And I want to make a promise right now to everyone who is listening. We will not leave this chair. We will not go to music. We will not fill the air with things that are not true in order to make the silence less frightening. We will stay here with you, and we will tell you what we know when we know it. And when we do not know, we will tell you that too. Because the most important thing a broadcaster can do in a moment like this, the only thing worth doing, is to be honest. Even when honest is terrifying, especially then.
Multiple intelligence community sources, including a former official who has been in contact with active officials tonight, now indicate that the Zagros event is being assessed by U.S., Russian, British, and French intelligence agencies, all simultaneously, all urgently. The fact that all four of those governments are simultaneously and urgently analyzing the same event is itself being treated, within intelligence community channels, as an effective signal. None of them are releasing a conclusion yet. The silence of four nuclear powers simultaneously analyzing the same potential nuclear detonation is a very specific kind of silence. It is the silence of people checking and double-checking because they understand that what they say next will determine what happens after that. I want to be on this broadcast when they speak. I want to be here to tell you what they find. I am not going anywhere.
And neither am I. To our listeners in Tel Aviv in your shelters, to the sailors in the Strait of Hormuz, to the nurse in Amman with her hands full, to the teacher in Seoul and the woman in the mountains outside Beirut and the man in Doha whose daughter asked if the sky was broken, and to every single person sitting somewhere in this world tonight carrying the weight of what is happening, we are here. We are listening. We are telling you everything we know. This is Last Signal Radio. My name is Susan John, and I am not going anywhere.
And this is James Carter. We do not know yet what the Zagros event is. We do not know yet what the next 24 hours look like. We do not know where the threshold is, as the retired colonel told us. What we know is this. The world tonight is in the most dangerous position it has been in within living memory. And the people in it, all 8 billion of them, deserve honesty, deserve clarity, deserve a voice that does not flinch. We are that voice. We will be here. Whatever comes next, stay with us. Last Signal Radio, live, continuing.